Guess what? We are excited to be talking to Smitha Papolu. And I'll be honest with you, I've probably mispronounced that name because I'm from Kentucky and we don't know how to say shit properly. I do, Brady. What the actual f***? The impending AI Doomsday.
It's like teaching a pet tricks by showing it how to do them, and then it learns to do them by itself. When AI comes into the picture, the pet comes up with its own tricks. That is the extension of machine learning.
There's a lot of chatter about criminals using AI. That chatter is bullshit. I don't need AI to help me be successful with an online attack.
The practical applications are so huge that misusing it is kind of hard right now.
Information is the most important thing on the planet right now. It's the most profitable thing on the planet right now. So how do we make sure that the companies who are running these AI systems aren't harvesting our data for profit? Johnson, former United States most wanted criminal, now good guy. Guess what? In today's world, criminals come in all shapes and sizes, but they've all got one thing in common. They all have criminal thoughts. On today's episode, we are excited to be talking to Smitha Papolu, and I'll be honest with you, I've probably mispronounced that name because I'm from Kentucky and we don't know how to say shit properly. But we're going to have her on. We're going to talk about AI and how maybe, perhaps, sorta, kinda, AI is not the impending apocalypse that everyone seems to be talking about on the planet right now. We're going to talk about that. But before we get to that, we're going to check in with Brian to see what kind of news he has for us. Brian?
Brett, you're not going to believe this. The Pentagon is lying. Congress held a historic hearing on UFOs last July, which featured testimony from Florida Representative Matt Gaetz. According to Gaetz, fighter pilots tracked 4 unknown objects flying in a clear diamond formation. Notably, the incident occurred on a training range, typically conspicuously free of any airborne clutter. In a case resolution report published last week, the Pentagon's UFO Analysis Office concluded with moderate confidence that the object observed by the pilot was a balloon, likely a large commercial lighting balloon.
Matt Gaetz! There's a pinnacle of truth. Let me be honest with you. Let's just put it out there. Truly, probably the only thing that Matt Gaetz really knows about is underage girls. All right, just saying, just put that out there. If that guy were to ever step off a prison bus, let me tell you, there's not a doubt in anyone's mind on the compound what that son of a bitch would be in there for, and it's not corruption. Well, corruption of minors, maybe. That's about it. So I don't put a lot of faith in Matt Gaetz. Now, that being said, do I believe that this was a weather balloon? No, by God, I do not. You can ask my little buddy here, do you believe it was a weather balloon? No. He doesn't believe it either. I say he, but let's be fair. Aliens are gender neutral. Gender neutral. You're worried about LGBTQ question mark? Aliens are all about that shit. Now that being said, weather balloon, flying in formation, fuck no, they're lying. How do we know that? Well, it's coming from the government's mouth. Does the government ever tell anything that's truthful? Probably not. Bear that in mind. We're going to be doing more alien bullshit on this show as we go forward. Why? Because this little guy brings me joy. Don't you, buddy? Yes, I do, Brady. See, he's even got kind of a Russian accent. Why? I don't know. Brian, let's go on.
The U.S. and Israel have been involved in intense discussions recently about whether Washington will sanction a unit of the Israel Defense Forces called Netzia Yehuda after reports of a string of human rights violations committed against Palestinian civilians in the West Bank before the Gaza conflict began in October. Netzia Yehuda was created in 1999 as an all-male combat unit with a specific goal of enlisting young Jews who had dropped out of ultra-Orthodox Jewish religious schools. U.S. sanctions would mean a ban on transferring U.S. weapons or giving military assistance to Netzia Yehuda specifically.
I was hee-hee-ha-haing about the UFO stuff. Now, this is not something to be joking about. It's not. Here's the thing. So October 7th of last year, I have been very vocal about my support for Israel, the Israeli people, and their right to exist because, God damn it, they have a right to exist. Now, all of that being said, that does not translate to permission of human atrocities, of war crimes, of going into the Gaza Strip and murdering 35,000 innocent Palestinians. That doesn't translate. That's not the way that works. And it's not the way that is supposed to work. Now, here's the thing. It seems that even though this Yehuda group that no one can seem to pronounce, especially me since I'm in Kentucky, or from Kentucky, it seems that we are not supposed to call out the IDF on any of their bullshit. And I don't believe that. I think it's our responsibility, it's our job to call this stuff out regardless. All right. Now, absolutely, I am anti-Hamas. All right. But not everyone that's in the Gaza Strip follows Hamas. You've got a ton of innocent people there. And those innocent people are being hurt and victimized by the Israelis because it's not about being humane and just. It's about revenge right now. And we've got to get past that. This is not how you win friends and influence enemies. This is how you make enemies. It's situations like this that you have to be, that if you will be to go into, have that incursion like that, it's of the utmost importance that you remain humane and just, that you are able to set aside any thirst for revenge that you may have. And that's not what we're seeing right now. And it gets worse than that. There's a reason I'm wearing this fucking Ole Miss hat today. All right. And that reason is this. I was watching the talk earlier. And it looks like we've got protests all across the United States right now. Palestinian protests. They're anti-Israeli. They're anti-Semitic at best. They're highly bigoted and racist at the same time. They're using intimidation techniques. There's some violence going on. And those protests are being allowed on campuses. The reason I'm wearing the Ole Miss hat is because I was watching a video of a protest at Ole Miss University. And this African-American lady, I guess she's on the wrong side of the protesters. You've got the protesters that are screaming and yelling at her. And there's one protester that's mimicking a monkey in front of her. So, no, I'm not wearing this hat in order to support Ole Miss. I'm wearing this hat so I can take this fucking ridiculous hat off and throw on the good old Bama hat. Because at the end of the day, at least Alabama ain't fucking Mississippi. Just thought I'd share that. Just thought I'd throw that out. And the worst thing is, so I've been posting I've been trying to be fair about this stuff, about the Palestinians and the Israelis. Because right now the Israelis are fucking things up. They are. They're killing innocent people. They're killing children. They're all about revenge. All right? The funny thing is I'll post something, like I posted something on my social media feeds. I said, 35,000 Palestinians have been murdered. Why did I post that? Because 35,000 fucking Palestinians have been murdered. The response, and you guys will love this bullshit, the response from several people has been, well, those numbers are greatly exaggerated. What the actual fuck? I seem to remember that way back, not too long ago, that there was a whole group of people that went through this thing called the Holocaust, and that a lot of anti-Semitic people use a phrase of, those numbers are greatly exaggerated. Yet now you're using that. Not only that, but I posted an article about these 6 children that were killed in a Israeli bombing attack. I got a response of, well, Brett, you have to watch out for deep fakes and crisis actors. Are you absolutely fucking kidding me? We've got to set aside our sides. We do. The only side that we should be on is the side of humanity. We shouldn't be on right wing, left wing, Republican, Democrat, Palestinian, Israeli. We should be doing what's best for our fellow human beings. And when we decide to choose that side and dogmatism comes out and we're just unable to be objective or to accept any real rational truth, you have responses like that. Like, you got to watch out for crisis actors. You got to, those numbers are exaggerated. It's a sad, sad thing that this is happening in our world.
The cause of death for O.J. Simpson, who died at the age of 76 on April 10th, has been revealed. Simpson, the former Hall of Fame football player and acquitted murderer, died from metastatic prostate cancer. His longtime lawyer, Malcolm Laverne, confirmed on April 26th. Simpson had been battling cancer since announcing in May 2023 that he had this disease.
So it turns out that the juice had ass cancer. That's what he had. He had a little ass cancer. You can't run from that. Don't give a shit how good you are on the field.
Fuck.
Now that being, I got Brian cracking up over that. I'm just saying the dude had ass cancer. He had cancer in his ass. That's what he had. It's a fact. I'm not trying to make a joke out of it. It's a fact. The tumor was in his ass. My stepson, my youngest one, he's 19. He was asking about the OJ trial when OJ passed away, and he did not really appreciate how big of a cultural event that trial was. I was at the University of Kentucky on the 7-year bachelor program, and every time there was a break, student hall, whatever, all of the televisions were tuned to that fucking trial. It was magnificent. Everyone was talking about it, and we remember. Looking back now, we actually remember the things that cost the prosecution that case. They had Mark Furman on there, racist from hell. Let me tell you something. You're trying to convict a black man, you probably don't want to put some KKK member on the stand saying, oh yeah, he did it. He did. I can't even say what all this son of a bitch believed in, but you can't do that because the jury's not going to buy that shit. But the real thing that got it to me, there were 2 things. So the first, the prosecution, in their infinite wisdom, they wanted OJ to try on the glove. So they didn't have to do it. They didn't. But the prosecution insisted on it. So they stand up, Your Honor, will you order Mr. O.J. Juice Ass Cancer Simpson to try on the murder glove? Sure, why not? O.J., try that fucking glove on. So O.J. gets up. He has to put one of those rubber gloves on first because it's evidence. You don't want to taint the evidence. So he's putting his isotoner gloves on. For those who don't remember, O.J. was an isotoner spokesman. Who would have known that later on isotoners would be used to commit the murder? Just saying, probably got those free at the time. So he's sitting there trying to struggle the glove on, and he's selling that shit to the jury. He's like 2 feet away from him. He's pulling, he's pushing, he's praying, he's screaming, he's grunting, and it won't go. He's looking at the jury. He's like, it don't fit. It don't fit. That was one hell of a blow to the prosecution. The other part was at the end of that trial, the defense comes out, and OJ had all these lawyers from hell. I mean, he had outstanding attorneys. So these attorneys come out, and their closing statements, they had this poster board that was marked beyond a reasonable doubt. And they went through every single instance, every argument that the prosecution put out. And they said, reasonable doubt, not reasonable doubt. The prosecution's full of shit. And the jury believed that. Now, the reason I'm saying that, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty. Okay? Not guilty. The son of a bitch was found not guilty. Do I think that he murdered those people? I don't know. But I do know he was found not guilty. And I also know that this man was found not guilty. And he was punished for that the rest of his life. In fact, when he did that little burglary, when he went to steal back his, sports memorabilia, he wasn't really sentenced for the burglary so much as he was sentenced for the murder of Nicole Simpson and Ron, whatever his name was. I have a problem with that. And the problem that I have with that is we live in a country of rules and laws. When you go through the judicial system and you are determined to be not guilty, I am of the belief that by God, it should end there. All right? That's what I believe. I don't believe that you should be punished for the rest of your life just because a large segment of the population believes that you were guilty. Okay? That story should be done by that point. And that bothers me. It does. It bothers me because it screams that we are a society that is not really one that's based on justice, but one that's based on revenge. And there's something really wrong with that. And maybe, I talked about the Israelis and the Palestinians. Maybe, just maybe, that's why we are okay with the Israelis exacting revenge in the Gaza Strip. All right, on today's episode of Criminal Thoughts. So here's the thing. We've got 8,500 plus security companies across the planet. We've got a lot of mass media across the planet, and we've got a whole ton of people on various social media platforms that are talking about the impending AI doomsday. How everything's going to go south, how AI is going to basically turn us into human batteries, aka the Matrix. I got to be honest with you. I am not the guy that really believes that BS. I'm not the guy. So I'm a former criminal. All right. I'm also not the guy that believes in the widespread criminal use of AI yet. I think that we're going to get there. I just don't think that we're there yet. Now, that being said, I am beyond honored and pleased to invite on and be able to have a conversation with Smitha Papolu. Is that the right way to say that, Smitha?
Yes.
All right, so
but that's good.
Papolu. All right, Smitha Papolu, and I apologize. There's no reason for me to say it improperly other than I'm from Kentucky and we are a backwoods lot. We're not able to pronounce much of anything. If you could hear my actual Kentucky accent, you would run screaming away like I have to get away from this idiot. All right, without further ado, let's talk to Smitha. Smitha, I'm going to let you, if you don't mind, because you're going to do a much better job at this than I am. If you could tell the listeners who you are, some of your background, what you do.
Sure. So it's interesting that you said, asked about my name pronunciation. If you Google me, there's no other Smitha Papolu you'll find. So however you say it, you'll probably find me. But yeah, so my background, I guess I'll start with the beginning. I came to school to the States from India, and I did my undergrad here. I studied new media interaction design, and then human-computer interaction. And the whole reason why I was interested in this field was, technology used by humans. Someone has to make sure it's meant for them and they can use it, because computers, are meant for, the way you design are in zeros and ones. People can understand that.
Sure.
So my job is to make sure that it's useful, usable, and also easy to use, I guess. That landed me in multiple different jobs where we were trying to see what else technology can do beyond today, right? It's not just, internet, of course, has been around for a long time, but it can, help you do things that maybe you don't know how to do, or
Sure.
that, just like learn, help you learn, and stuff like that. So when I was graduating, it was the recession, 2008. And a lot of people were looking for jobs. That means that you had to apply to a lot of jobs and hope that you got, picked even for an interview. And I will say, when I say a lot of jobs, hundreds of jobs. And can you imagine sitting there trying to find hundreds of jobs and tailoring your resume for each one? It's just depressing, frustrating, and close to impossible.
Sure.
So I met this team who felt like, okay, we can come up with a model that'll help make this easier. Okay. We go out and we find all of these jobs in your field. Then we take your resume and tailor it. That is a very simple example of how you can use, machine learning model, which is a branch of AI to, make your job life easier.
I mean, so the way you describe that, I mean, that's absolutely a benefit. So my resume, my resume is a very specific type of resume. It's not the type of resume that's going to get me a job in a usual corporate environment. It is the type of resume that will cause people to pause, look, and bring me in to speak or consult. But what you're explaining about most job seekers, especially as the economy heats up, as there are fewer and fewer positions left, and you have more in the workforce that are looking for those types of positions, it is a chore to have to tweak your CV or resume for every time that you apply for a job, and to have something that's able to do that for you, absolutely a boon. Absolutely.
Yes. And you see LinkedIn doing that now, right? Mm-hmm. They've been doing that in the past few years where they do it for you on their platform. But back then there was no LinkedIn. We had like Indeed and I think some other big job sites. But the key there, I would say, is not just helping you tweak it, but even when you submitted resumes to big companies, right? For a single job, you get hundreds, if not thousands of entries.
Sure.
And those systems also use certain keywords that, could be relevant that they filter out. So it was a process of matching that and your work, and maybe even inserting or reframing terms and keywords that you didn't have, right? That's the whole kind of benefit. You might not have the vocabulary, for example, right?
So let me ask you, and this is something I wanted to dive into. You mentioned machine learning. So is that when you've got a program that's doing that with resumes instead of having to do it manually all the time, is that AI or is that machine learning?
It is a branch of AI. Machine learning is a branch. It is kind of...
And I guess I need to backtrack. So can you define what machine learning is compared to what most people are considering AI is today?
So I will say I'm not the expert in terms of describing the technical aspects, but what I'm actually going to do for you is ask ChatGPT right now to explain
ask that ChatGPT.
what
It'll
is
say,
machine
tell
learning
Brett to shut the hell up.
In really simple terms, I found an answer. It says machine learning is like teaching a computer to learn from examples. Instead of giving it step-by-step instructions, you show it lots of examples and let it figure out patterns on its own. It's like teaching a pet tricks by showing it how to do them, and then it learns to do them by itself. Now,
so that's machine learning.
I would say, yes. So AI is, in my mind, let's take that example, right? And say, when AI comes into the picture, the pet comes up with its own tricks. That is the extension of machine learning. I don't know if that made sense, but that's how I think about it.
It does. So, and I guess this is where it's kind of going to get kind of fuzzy for me. When you take something like a large language model, ChatGPT, that's being called AI, but isn't that just a large machine language type of model, because you're exposing it to all these different types of examples and then you're putting parameters in there as well?
I would say yes, absolutely. And I think the interesting thing that, with ChatGPT at least, is it's able to understand what you're asking and then reason back why it's giving you an answer to what you were asking. I think that is kind of the an aspect of AI. It's not truly AI, right? It's not thinking for itself. That kind of stuff. It's still kind of repurposing and repackaging information that's already out there.
This is really interesting to me, and I'll tell you why. So, I'm a former criminal, turned good guy, widely respected nowadays on the good guy side. But I've seen this progression. I was very lucky that when I did turn my life around and I start this legal career of mine, I was very lucky that it happened along the same route that we're seeing, from a rules, and we're talking about, counter fraud or anti fraud here. So it went from a rules based system to a machine learning type of system. I was able to see that transition and track that. So it was very, very good development there. And now we're getting this transition over into quote unquote AI. What's interesting to me is, most people are calling Chat GPT the pinnacle of AI. Okay. And I think it's a very nifty product, but I don't think that, that it's true AI as
not.
most people would think. Okay, so that was my concern.
It gives general knowledge, right?
Right.
If you think about kind of what's powering ChatGPT, it's in a way, it's an interface for you to interact with large sets of data. That has not been easy to do before, right? Only people maybe who knew how to write code, write like prompts, for example, engineers knew how to access that data and even ask the right questions. And oftentimes with any kind of data, right, you only get the answer based on what you ask. And depending on how you ask it, you'll get a different answer every time. So I think what ChatGPT did is made it accessible, right, to anybody. When my parents ask me about it, that's when I feel like it's become so pervasive, right? People know about it. They know that there's a tool out there. And they're also asking very interesting questions of like, will AI take over the world, right? Will it take over jobs? Maybe one day. And I agree with you. Maybe one day. We don't know, right? But you can, you can dial up the factor of like where nobody has control or like it does exactly how humans do things. Maybe.
Right.
But we're far from it. So
and again, I get that there's the reality of systems like ChatGPT and the way that this is going toward AI. There's the reality, and then there's also the chatter. The embellishments, the advertising, the trying to get people to pay money, things like that. And I hear Elon Musk, even though I don't like to hear him a lot of the time. I hear Elon Musk. I hear a lot of people that are talking about how AI is going to be the end of humanity. I mean, I'm sure you see this frequently as well. I typically read an article 2 to 3 times a week about how AI is going to destroy mankind as we know it. And I don't believe that. And I don't think that you believe that either. So if you could talk toward that a little bit, I would appreciate that.
So I think the chatter around, AI could be the bad guy, right, in the future. I think it's normal and natural to have such a reaction to something that we don't know much about, or we don't know, or we feel like, we're not familiar with. We should be wary of all new technologies, especially if they, fit into our lives, especially if, governments and, companies are using it. But I think there's a lot more that's useful. And if we just think about it as a technology, right? Of course, it's going to change a lot of things that we do, maybe even everything. But I think it's not a competition. It's a partnership between humans and, computing systems, I guess.
Do you think that it's going to put anyone out of work, like coders, anything like that?
I wouldn't say today, but maybe in the future. I don't know if it would put it out of work, because for any job, I think that it requires an element of creativity and originality, which of course, these AI systems are totally capable of doing. But I would say it'll help us do things that maybe we're not doing today. It might help us be more efficient. It might help us not do kind of the bum work, right? It might give us a better starting point. So maybe so coders can, or designers or whoever, right, can even develop things faster and more things. So it's possible. I wouldn't say no, but we're so far from it. It's very good at discrete tasks, right? Not something complicated where it should or could keep a history of, where you started, right? It's not supposed to. That's the whole ethical part of AI. It's not meant to kind of remember so far back. But sorry, your original question about like where it can be helpful, useful.
I appreciate what you're saying about we're not at that point yet, and I agree we're not at that point yet, and that's one of the
Mhm.
main reasons that typically when I'm in a cybersecurity conference, there's someone,
Yeah.
especially right now, a year and a half ago it was the metaverse and how all this crime was going to take place on the
Yes.
metaverse. Then of course no crime took place on the metaverse because no one visited the metaverse. So then we have, the AI hype, and it's
Yeah.
been all about the fraud, the crime, the attackers, everything else. And typically
Yeah.
the people who are putting forth that notion are the same people who are trying to sell a product, service, or tool that defends a
Mm.
company against that type of attack. I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of chatter in criminal communities and environments
Yeah.
about how could we use AI to do this. But as far as anyone actually implementing that, I've not really seen that yet. And I'm make no
Yeah.
mistake, I'm of the same opinion that you are toward a lot of this. That hey, as it continues to develop, maybe, but right now, not so much.
I was trying to think, right? Like how people like even can access it, right? Access these AI-based
Right.
systems. And they are built by, companies that already have, regulations placed on top of them. There's, privacy and transparency laws that they
Sure.
have to adhere to, even the data sets that they use, right? So I think there's an element of kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say as much as there should be, but there is an element of regulation already built in to prevent people from misusing.
Right.
But if you just think about the technology itself, of course, right? It has the potential to be misused, like AI in terms of, all of the deep fakes or, image
Sure.
generation to impersonate, voice to impersonate, computer vision to, recognize things and know about things you shouldn't, right? So there's absolutely like small ways that that can happen. But I think there's more practical applications of it right now that it's the practical applications are so huge that misusing it is kind of hard right now.
And I don't know if you knew this or not, but on Telegram, on the dark web, there were a couple of instances of these large language models being tweaked so that
Hmm.
criminals could use them. We
Yeah.
had Fraud GPT, and I forgot the name of the other one. It may have been like Crime GPT or something like that. And really, what those were Chat GPT an older version that had those protocols, those safety boards removed from it. And
Hmm.
even then, and I think they were charging like $50 a month to get access to it or something like that. But the criminals who were using it, they didn't really do anything with it. They
Hmm.
ask questions that you could simply Google and get the right answers for that. But as far as using those things to launch attacks, didn't really happen. You mentioned deep fakes, and this is one of the things that I'm really concerned about. Right now, deep fakes are largely not real time. I know ByteDance came out with an audio deep fake that is real time, and that's very, very
Hmm.
successful with that. So we're going to get to the point where, if you want to call it AI is able to produce a deep fake in real time where I can have audio and video and have a conversation where it's me, but I look like the CEO of a company and I sound like the CEO of a
Yeah.
company. Um, you know, that's absolutely going to happen. Now that, as you pointed out, that doesn't start out as a tool for fraud or crime. That starts out as a
Hmm.
tool that someone's built, and then criminals repurpose it because that's what we do. Um, my thing is with that, right now, deep fakes. So you've got the good guys that they've got this system, this algorithm that identifies a deep fake. The attacker then goes off. They'll tweak their deep fake so that algorithm can no longer find it. They'll release it, and then the company has to tweak their algorithm so they can identify that deep fake, and it goes bounce, 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 back and forth, back and forth. That cat and mouse game, that almost reactive response to the attack. My concern is that once AI gets good enough, once it evolves to a point that the people who are producing deep fakes to attack, whether that be business email compromise, whether it be fake news, you're trying to manipulate potential stock markets, or you're trying to incite riots or what have you. My concern is that those deep fakes get to a point where the companies that have been identifying them can no longer do that, at least not be able to do that in a timely manner. Do you think that's a possibility at that point or not?
Yeah, I mean, I would say because we know that that's possible, I hope that we can build systems in a way that we can use AI to recognize those, right? To have indicators and
Right.
signals to be ahead of it. I think that's possible too. So
Okay.
I would say we are aware of how it can be misused, right? Even with like hacking and people
Sure.
who build security, for example. In order for you to build a security company, you need to know how to hack, right? To know what to
Right.
protect against. So
Right.
I think I would try to apply that same principle. At least that would be my perspective. If we know how it can be misused, what are the guardrails we can build in, or even like early signals, and try to kind of, I guess, use AI to prevent AI fraud?
That's actually kind of interesting now that we're talking about that. I'm considering that too. I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so the bad guys are going to have access to AI, the good guys are going to have access to AI. So really, it could just be that same level playing field that we've got right now. We've
Mhm.
got a new
Yeah,
tech that's in there, but at the end of the day, both sides have access to the tech, and it's still going to be, up to the company to make sure that everything's done right at the end of the day. So not really
yeah,
that much of a concern, hopefully.
yeah, exactly. Hopefully, always optimistic, but also,
Optimistic.
reality is it depends on how it ultimately how it shows up in people's lives, right? Like who uses it.
Mhm.
There has to be some kind of independent oversight bodies, right? It can't be
Right.
just one or two entities in power, for example. So that
Right.
still has to happen. Um, at the end of the day, like people's data, people's rights, right? They have to be kind of protected. Um, and if they're infringed upon, what is the, what do you do to help them? Right. I think all of those things need to be thought out and put into place. I don't know if we're there yet. I think we're actually
Right.
far from that too.
Well, and you mentioned too, and I think that you're completely right about that. It can't just be two or three groups that determine the guardrails, the use cases, things like that. It has to be, a group, several groups together, several demographics, several different types of companies, several different verticals that comes in. I think you have to have social, political, and economic groups that are coming in that are helping to determine these things. My question would be, I mean, we know what it is now. We know that large language models like ChatGPT, they're extremely popular. They've entered the social consciousness. They're widely used by people. People are widely testing them. They're very curious about that. So those aren't going anywhere. My question would be is where do you see, or how do you see AI evolving over, say, the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, from a technical perspective, I'm not super knowledgeable in like the
Sure.
how people build models, but I can speak to kind of the application side of it, and I hope and
Please,
the
yes.
way I see it evolving, right, is today, like you can think of, I don't know, like AI as having information about a lot of different topics. It's general, right?
Mhm.
It's very general, and for the average person that asks it a question, it'll give you an average answer, but there are going to
Okay.
be pieces of knowledge within that AI model that is about, I don't know, like finance. There's going to be an area of that AI model that's about medicine. There's going to be different topics, right? I think in the future
Right.
the models will get better at answering those kind of specialization questions, and helping people in specializations use them, rather than being so generic. Because today it tries to,
Right.
I think, give you kind of an average answer, and without context, it's not able to give you something more specific, right? You almost still have to teach it.
And I know you're big on the user experience. How does the user
Yeah.
experience evolve over the next 5 or 10? Because right now, you have to go to Chat GPT. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've used it. I'm not horribly impressed by it. I mean, I am on a technical side, but as for what it delivers, not so much. All right. But it absolutely shows promise. So for someone like me, that I see the potential, and I have a lot of hope for the potential. But right now, the user experience is not great.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think ChatGPT is just like one interface, right, of interacting with a large piece of information. There's forms of it, right? There's like natural language processing. I would love to see the models evolve beyond English, right? If I speak to you in like my native language, Telugu, you understand it. And I don't have to know your language and you don't have to know mine, right? Things like that. In terms of
That's nice.
The tools that I use, right? Actually, Samsung does this already. I think they have like live language translation. It's very impressive. I haven't used it, but I heard about it.
For me, that's a benefit. That truly is, because I'm an American, and we Americans, we are not good about learning anyone else's language because we are an entitled, privileged lot. Just being honest with you. Everyone else on the planet, they know someone else's language. Americans, no, we don't even call it English. We say, "Do you speak American?" That's how we do. So absolutely, that real-time translation is a boon. Absolutely it is.
But real-time translation, not a transliteration, but in the way that you speak, you understand the nuance, right? The terms that you have to describe things, right? The feeling and all of that. Like in my work, I can give you some examples. Like even for me to send you my bio, Dave put together something, and I put it through ChatGPT and said, "Make it this way, make it sound this way," right? And it did it for me.
Well, it sounded great.
Awesome. So I went through a few iterations and, gave it some instructions, right? But the way I see it evolving is it has to be embedded into the tools that we already use, right? Today we have virtual assistants.
I got you.
Right? Siri or Alexa.
Right.
It's kind of like one question at a time, right? It forgets the things that I've asked before, but maybe in the future I give it permission and, my privacy is still protected to whatever extent possible today. And I ask it a question, I can have actual conversation, not a Q&A, right? I see them evolving that way. And then...
See, that would be nice. I would like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And really becoming an assistant, right? It's like, me, meaning like my preferences, what time of the day I like to drive, if I'm going to ask you how long it takes me to get from, I need to go, to Whole Foods, right? And buy something, or Trader Joe's and get my, something, bread. It should be able to say, hey, you like to drive at this time, your meetings end at this time, and, the traffic is less at this time. So this is how long it's going to take you if you leave at this time.
Yeah, and what you're describing is something that even I would be interested in. I would like some sort of system that would book my, show things, the dates and the times, so that I don't miss out on them, because I sometimes do that because I'm an idiot. And then also remind me of stuff, but also anticipate the things that I need done. Maybe they would, reach out to potential guests for me, anything else like that, and have that conversation. I think that would be very good. Now that being said, and you've alluded to this, in order for that to work, I would have to give up a lot of my privacy to this program that's ran by a company. And as you know, companies love data.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that the companies who are running these AI systems aren't harvesting our data for profit?
That is the one thing that I think about every day. I work for a company, right, that uses data with permission. Of course, there's lots of rules governing how you use the data, and making sure that it's secure also in how it's stored. I think this is actually going to be a real problem, and a big problem in the future, when these kinds of connected systems, start making it into our lives, right? Making their way into our lives. And I'll give you an example.
Right.
Today, the whole being targeted for content, right? We already have those systems in place. There's this mesh of data where, depending on who you interact with, right? who you chat, what websites you visit, what websites they visit, where do they shop, and where
Right.
do the people that they interact with shop, right? It's a mesh. Like companies are already connecting this data. That's why they're so accurately able to sell you something that you just thought about.
Right.
It's not quite because they were listening. It's because they have this data that can make these predictions, right? I think at the end of the day, it comes down to who has access to it, right? How easily accessible is it? And if people can access it, how easy it is for you as the owner of the data to delete, control it, or do something that doesn't expose you, right, and make you vulnerable. That I don't think exists today,
Sure.
or not very easy. You have no control, right? And people are selling that also.
Right.
There are legal companies that can sell and profit off of it already today.
Just for my listeners' edification, what Smitha said there, you need to pay attention to what she's saying. Companies collect data, especially in the United States, because we Americans, we are idiots when it comes to our own privacy. We will give up anything if we get just a free app or bonus points or any number of things like that. A lot of people on Twitter, on Facebook, they think that these platforms listen in or monitor their conversations, their emails, things like that. That's not really the way this thing works. The way it works is all of that data is captured, all right? The systems, once they capture enough data about you, they can tell things like, are you about to get married? Are you pregnant? What are your likes and dislikes? They can determine every single thing about your life without having to monitor your phone calls or emails or anything else like that. That's the power of data. Data, really, information is the most important thing on the planet right now. It's the most profitable thing on the planet right now. Tech companies have known that for years. So as we're moving into AI, in order for it to be, and I believe this, I firmly believe this, in order for it to be really a life-changing type of application, you are going to have to sign over a lot of your privacy to those types of systems if they are going to benefit your life, all right? The problem becomes is when you do that, is the company that owns those systems, is that company going to harvest your data to figure out your likes, your dislikes, how to advertise to you, how to manipulate you? And there's a very real concern about that, a very real concern. And I appreciate Smitha mentioning that and touching upon that topic, because this is something that is going to absolutely affect every single person on this planet at the end of the day.
You know, as optimistic I am, I feel like for it to, it can be like a point of inflection, right? Where it can go bad. Like for me, like you're familiar with Black Mirror, right? It's all technology that exists today.
I love
Black
that
Mirror.
show. The last season, let's be honest, the last season was not great, but it's a great show.
Yeah. And to me, Black Mirror was very scary because everything they talk about in there, or every episode plot, is stuff that exists today. It's just pushed over a little bit, where it's everywhere, right? So I think it's that. Bit. It's like for us to just be aware of that. And at the end of the day, people's information is people's right. I think that has to be the fundamental, tenet of how rules are made, how companies, use this data and whatnot. And of course, companies are usually for profit. So what are these regulatory bodies going to, define that these corporations ultimately need to follow? All of that, right? I think it's the access, it's how the people who own the data will be able to then also control it or have rights over it.
Are you hopeful that the powers that be that they actually get to the point where they respect the privacy of others like that or not? I've got a lot of apathy in cybersecurity and a lot of distrust, but I'm still kind of that optimistic guy at the end of the day.
I personally wish would be people, right? People should actually be involved in that process, and just like a jury, right? People whose data it is, like regular people, need to be involved in that process of governance. It can't be just bodies that are, there's no transparency, right? Who are these people at the end of the day? We don't know. So I think there should be an element of citizens, for example, who are also responsible, part of that kind of regulation, regulatory body. That I would say would make me feel better. But yes, I do trust that could happen. But I think it'll be a work in progress, right? As this technology keeps
Right.
developing, people should actually use it. People should use it so that they can realize the drawbacks, the faults, the biases within these systems. Because ultimately, they're the only
Right.
people who know how it affects them. And so if you look at, people who are separated from that, it's hard for them to be empathetic of like, ultimately, how does this affect my life? Right? It'll become generalized. It'll be
Right.
laws that don't cover details. It'll cover generically, for example.
So, and hey, make no mistake, I absolutely appreciate you talking to me about this today, because it's allaying some of those concerns that I've had. It's giving me hope for a future. It's kind of hard with me sometimes, and again, I've used ChatGPT as a matter of fact. So I'm 54. That being said, I am really a man child. I absolutely am. I mean, I've got toys throughout the house. I'm doing all kinds of just, teenage antics. I only yesterday started using the image creation tools, the Chat GPT, where you can just describe an image and it's supposed to create it for you. Well, idiot Brett, being that man child that I am, I did not. I mean, what I wanted it to draw was stuff that a very young teenager would like to see.
Sure.
I'm trying to be diplomatic as I say that.
I'll try not to use my imagination, but okay.
Well, I tried to use my imagination and it didn't let me.
Yes.
I understand why it didn't let me, but I'm a grown man. And if I want to see cartoon things that jiggle, I should be allowed to see that. So I was not happy. Then I tried some other stuff, because what I was doing was, I'm just now going into crypto. Okay. And I'm doing fairly well with that. I've only been ripped off like 4 or 5 times. So I think I consider myself fortunate. But I would like to, in the future, I would like to have an AI tool there that I could say, hey, tool, what do you think about this token? Is it a potential rug pull? Is it trustworthy? Where do you see it going? Because right now you can pull that crap with GPT and it's crap, But if you had an actual system that was able to, look at the history of the developers, pull and see if pictures were catfish pictures, look at the chain itself and be able to determine how much fraud was happening on that specific chain. Things like that, I think it would be very beneficial. I think it could go even further than that. If you had a tool that you could describe a type of token that you would like to create, I think that it would be very beneficial for that. Not only that, but coming up with like NFTs for the token. Because got to be honest with you, that was kind of what I was thinking when I used that. Of course, when I used it and it pops up to describe a picture, I forgot all about crypto. And I was like, let's see if it'll make a picture of this. And it didn't. So, that user interface, I'm very hopeful that we get to the point where it does become a benefit for people overall. Do you think that Elon, and I don't like Elon, do you think that Elon is correct about this doomsday scenario where, you've got robots coming from an AI future that are looking for everybody to be John Connor at the end of the day?
I mean, from a possibility perspective, I would say sure. But I think there are so many other doomsday scenarios that are more possible before that happens.
I know, like this November.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying, right? Like, is that the worst of our problems? Yeah. And with AI image generation, don't even get me started. I hope we get better, but I think the example that you mentioned, where it wouldn't give you the image that you were looking for, is a part of how some of those guardrails are built. But
yes,
I don't know if they're perfect yet. I think we're still figuring it out, right, as we go. And unfortunately, the image generation tools are based on, today's data, right? And today's data is already heavily biased. There's been lots written about it. And so maybe the thing for people to know basically out of all of this is know that it is biased and go with, that grain of salt, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is an extremely good point. I've talked about the bias in facial recognition systems. So for those who don't know, and just to do a quick recap, facial recognition systems are extremely good when they are trying to identify a Caucasian person. They suck, and I mean they suck, when it comes trying to identify a person of color. Why is that? Well, it turns out that the developers were largely Caucasian. So their models that they compared everything to were all white people. Yeah. So it's very good about identifying that. And AI has that same issue going on. If you are a specific demographic that's developing a product, that product absolutely goes or veers toward that type of demographic. So if you're, to put it in layman's terms, if it's all white people that are developing AI, guess what? You're missing out on 80% of the planet. And the other 80%, they're not going to have a good user experience. They're not going to get the right results that they're looking for because the tool was not developed by a group of different demographic types of people. And that's a problem. It's a huge problem. And it's something that we in the security industry, at the very least, we have had a lot of difficulty with that, not only with race, but also with gender. So that becomes an issue. And if we're going to do things right, especially with AI, if we're going to do things right and make sure this is developed properly, it's important to be all inclusive across the board.
That's right. Yeah. And I would say, especially with image generation, it's very good at, or today at least, today the models are very good at being literal. And it's the bias that comes from the people who make those models or, train those models, but also the data set itself. The data set itself is very much biased. Like gender bias is rampant on Midjourney. I would not recommend it.
Right.
If you say person, it'll almost always give you a male as the default.
Yes,
human.
it will. Yes, it will.
So yeah, all of those,
males have made it, and males have said we are the only ones that are important.
And there's lots been written about biased data sets, big data in general, right? So I think it's the awareness that and in a way, the good thing though, the great thing about this is you can even ask, how did you come up with this answer? How did you come up with this image? Why did you choose this? And it will explain. That is the beauty of, I think, interacting with
I like that.
ChatGPT or any of these systems, which I don't think we could do even with Google, right? Google is absolutely biased.
But not only was Google biased, but their AI system had those biases very apparent. First of all, I apologize about the audio delay, but I want to thank you truly for taking the time to come over and talk about this stuff. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. The honor is mine. I was so excited when David introduced us, and yeah, your optimism has only increased.
It has. I love the hell out of you. Now, that being said, if someone wants to reach out and contact you, how do they go about contacting you?
Right now, LinkedIn is the best place. You can actually find me. You might not be able to see my face, but that's me.
Okay.
I don't believe there's other Smitha Papolus on LinkedIn that I could find, but yeah.
So Smitha Papolu, you can find her on LinkedIn. You can Google her. She's going to be the only Smitha like that pops up. She's already said that, and it's absolutely true. Reach out to Smitha on LinkedIn. I think that she is an absolutely amazing person. She is highly intelligent, and she knows what she's talking about when it comes to AI and the user experience and how that's going to evolve in the coming years. Smitha, thank you so much for coming on the Criminal Thoughts podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so that was Smitha Papolu, talking about AI, talking about the user experience and how it's going to develop over the coming years. And what's really interesting, I think, from that conversation is the idea, first of all, that, hey, it needs to be all inclusive. If it's going to develop the way that it needs to develop, if it's going to actually be a benefit to mankind or humankind, let's not say mankind, let's say humankind. If it's going to be a benefit to humankind, then we need to make sure that it's more than just white guys that are developing these products. And not only more than just white guys, that it's also a range of different ideologies, because I alluded to that in this conversation of how Google absolutely, you knew the biases when you were trying to use their AI product. And why do I say that? Well, because it comes out that if you used Google's AI a couple of months back and you wanted it to create an image of, say, Ben Franklin, well, that image was of a person of color. If you ask it to come up with any image of any person whatsoever, it was typically a person of color, even though you were looking for historical figures. It was veering toward making sure that white people were not represented. Okay, so I know what they were trying. They were trying to be all-inclusive, but they were doing it in the wrong way. In order to truly be a fair system, you are going to have to include ideologies that you don't like. You're going to have to be representative of everyone, which means that everyone is going to have a hand in making sure and in developing these products, okay, to make sure that it is fair across the board, to make sure it is all-inclusive across the board. Are you going to piss people off? Yes, you are. You absolutely are. But that's the price to be paid when that happens. Not only that, but we talked about this as well, making sure that the data, because if it's going to be a good system, you're going to have to give up some of these privacy concerns that you've got. You're going to have to give these systems a lot of the data that you may be uncomfortable with giving them. In order to do that, we have to make sure that the companies who are running these systems are not accessing that data and using it to manipulate us, to sell us advertising on whatever product or service they want to make money from. We're going to have to make sure that they're good stewards of our data. Does it happen? Shit, I don't know. I don't. I can tell you right now that most companies out there are not good stewards of our data. You know, they resell our data. Typically, we don't know that they're doing that. They manipulate us. They do any number of things with that. So we have to have a fundamental change if we're to expect AI to be beneficial and not detrimental to us. My name is Brett Johnson. This is the Criminal Thoughts Podcast. So those who have listened to the entire thing, you may realize that, hey, Brett did not do the criminal insights section after the news. Well, no, I didn't. Yeah. Because we're going to see how it works with adding on the criminal insights at the end of the show, kind of as a wrap up. Here's what's kind of interesting, and I mentioned this. There's a lot of chatter about criminals using AI. That chatter is bullshit. Make no mistake about it. That chatter is bullshit. Yes, criminals are talking about it, but largely they are not using it right now. Why aren't they using it? Well, because the user experience fucking sucks. That's why. It's easier to just, criminals use, because I'm a criminal, we don't reinvent the wheel. If something is working, we just continue to use that same technique we've been doing until something forces us to change our behavior. Right now, phishing, social engineering, that's still highly popular. It's still highly effective. I don't need a chat GPT or an AI program to fix that for me because it's already working just fine. The threat landscape that's out there, and I've talked about this before, 90% of all attacks use known exploits. 56% of companies have experienced a breach because of third parties. 41% of every single router on the planet has the default password, and 92% of every breach begins with a phishing attack. What that translates to is I don't need AI to help me be successful with an online attack. All right, I don't. Now, That being said, there are a lot of criminals that are chattering about it. As the user experience, that interface becomes better, more refined, ubiquitous, cheaper, and able to do more instead of just simply regurgitate a lot of bullshit. As that becomes better at that point, we absolutely will see online attackers incorporate AI into their attacks. But understand, and this is the criminal insight, there's no need to do that when the crimes that you are committing are already highly successful. Don't fix what isn't broken. That's the criminal insight of the day. My name is Brett Johnson. This is the Criminal Thoughts Podcast. We are going to close things out. How do we do that? Well, we're going to do that the same way we do it every single day with my gender neutral. If you don't believe it, look at him. That's right, gender neutral. The dude ain't got no penis. He ain't. Is he a dude? I don't know. I think he's a dude.
He's a Ken.
You know, that ball.
The Ken doll.
The Ken, exactly. He's like Ken. All right. If you want to see an alien penis, what you can do is you can take a Sharpie, you can draw down his bald head a line, he'll have a penis head at that point in time. All right, just saying. Just throw that out there. Anyway, stay safe out there. Stay secure. Stay vigilant. Stay vigilant. My God, I can't really talk about that enough, how important that is to be aware of your environment and to pay attention to things. Know that there are predators in every single environment. Be aware of that. Stay cautious. Stay vigilant. More importantly, at the end of the day, just do the right damn thing. My name is Brett Johnson. This is the Criminal Thoughts Podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I truly appreciate it. Until next time.